Bobby Brown, who I love. Donald Trump was in his video for the Ghostbusters movie, On Your Own. Donald Trump was on Will Smith. Half of the rappers and artists had a Donald Trump reference in their music because,
Mm,
rap represents an aspirational lifestyle. You talk about driving a Benz or Rolls Royce, and you still living with mom. So we grew up with Donald Trump. I mean, admittedly, I grew up. I've read all of Donald Trump's books, and I was a big Donald Trump fan. And I came in when he ran with admiration and respect for him. Obviously, I'm very critical of his policies.
On Trial with Josh Lowry.
welcome to this week's episode of On Trial with Josh Lowry, the episode where we take one issue and we put on trial, although I'm now probably going to put 5 issues on trial today. Look, we have a lot in today's episode. Later in the episode, you're going to hear my conversation with Indiana Congressman André Carson. He is the Democrat who represents District 7 for Indiana. He's one of only 2 Democrats in the House of Representatives from the state of Indiana. 2 of our 9 are Democrats. It's a great conversation. We were able to touch on a lot of topics that I was particularly interested in. André Carson. First off, look, it was a big deal for me. I just had a congressman sit down and talk to me on my podcast, right? Like, I got into politics to make people's lives better. I think a lot of you have heard me tell my story about I adopted our 2 oldest. They're teenage girls. We adopted them from Pennsylvania, and right after we adopted them, Roe versus Wade got overturned, and I realized I brought them from a state where they had more rights to a state where they have less rights. And I saw as every issue was going to go back to the state level, I had to be a part, or at least try to be a part of the people that are making those decisions about my daughter's freedoms. Now, as I got into it, you quickly realized it's a lot more than just your daughter's freedoms. Decisions are being made that affects everyone. And that's not to say, people that are interested in politics sometimes don't care about issues that don't touch them. I think a lot of us, myself included, don't understand how politics can touch every aspect of your life. So when you have a congressman like André Carson that you trust, that you feel like no matter what the situation that's put in front of him, he's going to do what's best for Hoosiers, not special interests, not the people just in his ear, but for the people of his district and all of Indiana. It's heartwarming. Like, it just, in a time where you see so much of politicians just doing shitty stuff, man, to sit down and talk to Congressman Carson, it just felt like this guy has our back. It was a breath of fresh air. It really was. So I think you're going to enjoy that interview. And before we get to that interview, I have a couple different topics I want to hit on. Most of them are things that I discussed with Congressman Carson, but a few other things has been burning my chaps. Is that the phrase? Burning my ass? I want to say something about him. How about we go with that? All right. Number 1, I got about 5 of them. All right. So we're going to come up with some cool nickname for today. We'll say this is Josh's Sunday starting 5. All right. Number 1, Trump taking over DC. For those of you that haven't seen, Donald Trump has used the National Guard. He's federalized the police force of Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. is a little bit different from basically the rest of the country, right? Because it's not a state. It should be, but it's not. It's a federal area, right? That's why we call it the District of Columbia. So there is a statute that allows him to do this. The problem is that it was all pretext. A dude named Big Balls, I'm not joking. Well, he calls himself Big Balls. Let's be clear. We don't know if that's descriptive, and honestly, we don't care. But one of Elon Musk's Doge guys apparently got attacked, right? And look, that's bad, of course, right? We don't want violence at but that was used as a reason to federalize the entire Washington, D.C., to federalize the police force, to bring in the National Guard. Pretty strict and intense stuff. We'll say for a later date whether this is just preparing for, future city takeovers. Here's specifically what I want to deal with. A lot of people have pointed out that Washington, D.C. has actually been getting crime under control. The crime is down from historic highs. And even that's recent history. For those of you that don't know, like the 1980s, there used to be a fuck ton of violent crime, but there isn't near as much anymore. Actually, go watch Jason Takes Manhattan. It's the 8th Friday the 13th movie. And there's a scene where Jason Voorhees walks through Times Square. And I remember watching this movie and being like, what in the hell? That's not Times Square. Like, I grew up watching Total Request Live. I watched the ball drop on New Year's Eve, right, in Times Square. Times Square is a fun place to be. There's the naked cowboy singing. You got people dressed up like the Statue of Liberty. Jimmy Fallon's there for any reason. Like, it's a fun place. So when I see this movie and Jason Voorhees is walking through Times Square and there were literally like, there was drugs and gangs and prostitutes. I mean, it seemed pretty over exaggerated. I've since learned that that was actually a little more probably representative than I would have thought. And part of that is because there was more violent crime. There's actually, like, I've seen some stuff that very well could have been because of like the lead paint that was getting used in the 50s or 60s that was making motherfuckers more violent. And that was like the peak of that. Like, if it's making you more violent and you're becoming a teenager or early grown up, that's when you're going to commit more crime, right? But the point is, crime was significantly higher, violent crime in the 80s, massive drop, 2000s, 2010s. And there was a spike during COVID, which goes to show you that at its core, crime is a reaction to what's going on because there were people with more time. There were more people at home. There were people that couldn't afford to pay their bills. And like, I'm not saying this is like an explanation for it, right? When I worked at the Attorney General's office, I worked in criminal appeals. And one of the things I learned that almost most violent crimes, the people already know each other. There's a ton of domestic violence, even not just like between significant others, but they're the people that know each other. Yes, some of it is like gang related. Yes, some of it is just, but like the idea that there's just random attacks just really is not like backed up by the science. Like, that's very rare, right? It's way more likely that there are two people that have a dispute over something, and that leads to the issue, the violent crime, right? So when crime went up in 2020, Fox News and all these right wingers made this out to be this thing of, you can't walk in the downtown area, you're going to get killed. I worked downtown Indianapolis for a decade. I went out to lunch every day. I went to Pacers games and stay late. Like, like, I think any place, there are certain times at places where like, hey, it's 3 a.m. Maybe I shouldn't go out and do something stupid. Something worse may happen, right? This isn't something where like you're walking in broad daylight and just, Jason Voorhees walks by and then, somebody gets mugged. But that was the idea that Fox News and all these right wingers created. I mean, I've heard in my personal life of people say, I had stopped going downtown because I thought I would get robbed. I thought it was so scary. And then they went and it wasn't like, they're like, oh, that was nice. I went on the paddle boat on the canal. And there's a whole nother topic about that. But the point is this, right? Like, violent crime did go up 2020, but it's come down since then because there were reasons for it, right? There just wasn't this explosion of people became violent, and now that's what's running over society. So crime has decreased, but Trump wants to paint a picture as though everybody should live in fear and there's massive crime happening. And that's why he's got to do this stuff, right? No, he wants to be an authoritarian and he wants to flex his power. And it's all because of insecurity. Like, there's a lot of things where he's a terrible person and he's trying to enrich himself. I really think this is just him being insecure and wanting to feel like a tough guy. So the problem, though, here's the problem. Among all the problems, but the problem I want to discuss in this opening. The problem is that I see in response people arguing crime is better. We don't need to do this, right? We don't need to federalize the police force. And then I've seen a lot of political analysts respond to them and say, That's a losing message. You can't say that. You have to double down on crime is bad. And they're basically suggesting that there's no way to win a messaging war on this issue. And that's the part of me where I go, fuck the political messaging. Do and say what the right thing is. We'll worry about what ads we're going to run in 2026 when that time comes. When something wrong is happening, you got to say something. If someone is lying and saying that crime is higher when it's not, you say that crime is not higher. Every human can't live their life as though it's a political campaign. And also, you just sound insincere. If you're like, well, that's not really the issue. Let's talk about egg prices. There's a fucking authoritarian takeover of Washington, D.C., and we're just supposed to act like nothing's happening? I will grant the idea that maybe from a political standpoint, a better way to message is something like, we always want to take crime seriously, but we need to institute ways to reduce crime, and creating a militarized force is not how to do it. You want to know how to prevent crime? Go look at what the mayor of Baltimore, Maryland has done. One of the biggest drops ever in crime. And you know why? He actually did things that prevented it. I think some people forget that a lot of times when we're talking about policing and sentencing and prosecutors, you're talking about the crime has already happened. But there's a lot of social reasons. I mean, we had a great episode a few weeks ago where we talked about this. And there's a lot of social reasons that crime happens. And when you address those issues, crime goes down. So yes, if you're purely talking about political messaging, probably the right way to say it is something along the lines of, hey, look, of course we want to do something about crime, but we've already seen how to prevent crime. And that's by the policies like they're doing in Baltimore that actually work to improve people's lives, not sending soldiers everywhere. Okay. Maybe that is a better political messaging. But I'm not going to still sit here and act like there's not a fucking military force walking around Washington, D.C. I'm not going to act like this is normal, because it's not normal. It's some authoritarian shit. And the idea that we've even gotten here blows my mind. I will say I am very concerned about the number of people that seem okay with it. But I still think a lot of even that is based on the idea that, well, this is how we prevent crime. You send out soldiers, you lock people up, you throw away the key. Guys, it's never worked. Never has, never will. You want to stop crime? You don't show how tough you are and send out the military. You improve people's lives so they don't need to resort to crime, and so that they're in situations that don't lead to crime. This is not a movie. This is not Jason. This is not, they're good guys and they're bad guys. Every time there's someone that commits a crime, that is a human, that is a person. There were decisions and things happen in the life of that person that led to that moment. This is so symptomatic of what we do in America. We deal with the symptom instead of the underlying issue. If we just actually give a shit about people and take care of people and help people meet their needs and support education and give kids stuff to do, crime decreases. We know this as a fact. We don't need to show how tough we are and send soldiers to do something that's not what they went into the military for. I feel bad for most of these soldiers, right? Like, they're marching around DC. Like, is that what they signed up for? I doubt it. So much about the Trump administration, and this is just one example, is they're always taking something and blowing out of proportion, or diagnosing something that the average American does think's a problem, then they just do the wrong thing about it, right? This is like the whole, we've got to improve the economy for the middle class, so I'm going to cut taxes for billionaires. That doesn't add up. That doesn't make any sense. It's not the right solution, just like sending the military forces into Washington, D.C. is not the right solution, even if crime was higher. It's a tenfold problem. Trump is handling it in the worst way possible, as always. That was topic number 1. And I'm taking way longer, so maybe we're not going to do all 5. I do want to quickly hit, though. I think a lot of you have heard of this Jeffrey Epstein feller. I believe you pronounce it Ghislaine Maxwell, was basically his assistant that actually recruited young girls and cooperated in the assault of them. I mean, she was actually convicted of sex trafficking of minors, right? So this isn't just like allegedly, like she was convicted. It came out recently that apparently Trump is all over the Epstein files. His name is all over the place. So he and all his people have been calling for the release of the Epstein files forever, but now Trump doesn't want them released. So they're like, well, we got to give him something, right? So the Department of Justice has gone to ask for the grand jury transcripts from Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. Or no, sorry, not trial, the grand juries before that. Actually, let's start this back. I don't even think, see, this is what they do. They take something that they know the average person probably doesn't catch on to, not because the average person is smart, but because the average person has a job, has kids, and they don't have time to memorize every system. When it comes to a criminal trial, okay, yes, you are in front of a jury. That jury is deciding whether or not you're guilty. Before that, they do things called grand juries. And basically, they bring in jurors and they present some of the evidence to the jury. And the jury gets to vote to decide that there is probable cause to charge someone, right? Sometimes you don't need a grand jury, right? Like sometimes, somebody shoots somebody on camera and we all see it, right? Other times it's a more iffy case. And so you have to present the evidence. That's a grand jury. I had to deal with this at the Attorney General's office in Indiana. Grand jury transcripts or grand jury recordings are confidential by nature, except for exceptions, right? These things don't usually come out because it's not a fully fledged criminal proceeding, right? At a grand jury proceeding, defendant isn't there to defend themselves. They don't even have to present all the evidence because it's not a full trial. It's just saying, is there probable cause to charge someone? It is not saying this person is beyond a shadow of a doubt, on reasonable doubt, guilty. It's a lower standard. So some of the reason that grand jury transcripts and grand jury recordings are not just made public is, one, there's usually a lot of victims' names in it, right? But two, all of it could be made up. Now, in a case like this, she was convicted once everything was put in front of the jury. So that's not what happened, right? But let's say there's an informant and that person testifies to a grand jury, and that is the reason that someone is charged with a crime. It then turns out later that informant was just making shit up. Charges get dismissed. If they put that grand jury transcript out, that person's life is over because now there's all this testimony saying this person did this, even though we know it didn't happen at that point. You see, there's reasons. And also, the defendant wasn't there to defend themselves. This is not a full-blown trial. Grand jury hearings and transcripts are not a full-blown trial. What is a full-blown trial is the full-blown criminal trial where Ghislaine Maxwell was found guilty. But one of the key tenets of America's criminal system is that you were found guilty for this crime, not that you're found guilty for being a bad person. So when you go into a case, a lot of times there could be evidence that is somewhat related to the crime, but not really. But it shows you doing bad things that have no effect on whether or not you did this crime, right? If you're on trial for stabbing someone, is it really fair that you then go in, introduce a ton of evidence that you have 4,000 speeding tickets? Not really, because the question is, did you stab this person or not? And if all this evidence of your speeding tickets come in, all that shows is this person is irresponsible as shit. And now our juror could say, you know what? This person is going to kill someone driving. We shouldn't want them out on the streets. That's dangerous. So I don't even know if they stab this person, if I'm guilty, because I don't want them back out there. Right? That is why a lot of things get excluded from a criminal trial. It's supposed to be about the issue in front of you. I have a friend once, you want a good example? I have a friend once that was on a jury for a murder trial. Afterwards, he found out that it actually was a drug deal. The drugs were never mentioned in the trial because the question was, did this person murder another person? And if the drugs had been brought up in the trial, the only question would have been, oh, this is a drug dealer. Did they deserve it? You're supposed to put the person on trial for the thing they're being accused of, not for being a bad person. So that kind of goes too with the grand jury thing, right? If the whole point was to present evidence showing that Ghislaine Maxwell had been sex trafficking kids with Jeffrey Epstein, they may have had exact proof of here are cases of her sex trafficking kids. And that goes to the jury, they see it, and they find probable cause, right? Donald Trump may have never come up in this because he may not have been involved with those specific cases. Also, like, we don't know what's in the files. Like, he may have actually not been involved at all with any of the sex trafficking. And there's a bunch of references to his name, and he knew that it was happening and didn't do anything about it. That wouldn't have come into this at all because that's not what's on trial. Like, first off, Donald Trump was not the president then, right? We don't know exactly what is in that grand jury transcript, but almost certainly there's no reference to Donald Trump because it wasn't about Donald Trump. It was about Ghislaine Maxwell and her allegations, the ones that they were proving. Ghislaine Maxwell was not put on trial for 30 years of activity and all the people that she knew. She was not put on trial for everything that was in the Epstein files. She was put on trial for specific instances. If there was someone that wasn't involved in those specific instances, their names wouldn't have been brought up in the grand jury transcripts. So the idea that the DOJ is now going and saying, hey, we got clearance for these grand jury transcripts to be released. Trump's name isn't in them. Boom. Story over. No, story ain't over because that was only about specific instances that were being put in front of that court and that grand jury. If they wanted to prove Trump wasn't involved, they could release the goddamn Epstein file. They have it under their control. The grand jury transcripts is specific to Ghislaine Maxwell and those charges. Like, this is a red herring of red herrings, but that's what they do about everything. I'm going to keep going back to this, not just this episode, but in probably every episode, because it is the one thing that is driving me. The Trump administration and the elected Republicans lie about everything, and it's exasperated. It's offensive. I can't believe they do it, to be honest with you. But, like, they lie about ending inflation. They lie about, I'm going to end the war on day one. They'll lie about anything when they're running for office. You know how often there were accusations of, like, what I was going to do in office when, like, I had never said anything about that. Like, they just sent out mailers. Actually, you want proof? Tiffany Stoner and I, she ran over in district that way. Forgot the number. And her and I ran for the same office. Anybody that's heard us talk knows that we're not exactly the same people. I love Tiffany. Great person. If I lived in her district, I would vote for her. We have very different personalities and tactics, right? And they ran the exact same mailer. Literally, they took me, they took her, and they just, like, changed their names because none of it was true. They don't even, like, say, hey, let's attack Josh for what he said. They don't even say, hey, let's attack Tiffany for what they say. They just lie because it's been able to work. And then they get in office and then they just lie again. Trump lies about not being in the Epstein files. He lies about releasing the Epstein files. He either lies about what he's going to do or he does something and lies about what he did. And that's what pisses me off. They're actively hurting Americans. They're actively hurting Hoosiers. And they're getting away with it because they're lying. If this were some sort of 2012 Obama Mitt Romney debate, we stood up there and Republicans said their part and Democrats said their part, and the media actually called balls and strikes. And the voters said, you know what? We want more tax cuts for billionaires. We want people to be kicked off Medicaid. If they actually heard what was going to happen and chose that alternative, it would suck, but at least I would understand what's happening. We'd have an acceptance of what as a society we said we're going to do. The problem right now is people are voting on things that aren't happening. They're voting on things that are being said that are going to happen and they don't happen. They're voting on results that didn't happen. Like, it's just, they're being lied to, right? I'm going to bet a lot of you are just like me and you have a lot of Republicans in your life and you're like, that's not a bad person. That's a good person. I like them. I trust them. What is going on here? How are they voting for these people like Trump? They're just doing horrible things. It's because they're getting lied to every step of the way. Fox News, mailers, TV ads. Man, the last time JD Vance told the truth, I think it was probably when he talked shit about Trump 10 years ago. And both the things we talked about today, the takeover of DC, the Ghislaine Maxwell transcripts, it's just another example. Republicans lying to their voters. Makes it really hard, to be honest with you, to run against. Because do you take the time to say, here's what I'm going to do? Or do you take the time to point out that they're lying? Because the other part is they're over there promising magic. Trump was going to cut taxes, end inflation. He was going to create tariffs that the other people were going to pay for. Look, the tariffs get paid after the product comes to the country. The idea that the other country's paying for is like just not even the process of how it happens, but he just says it because he doesn't care if he lies. I actually trust voters a lot more than I think the average person. But when someone is lied to, it's really hard to say that that person is able to make an informed decision. I personally think if all the facts were given straight, we said what we were going to do, Republicans actually said what they were going to do, and there's a neutral, independent moderator that called out the lies, this wouldn't even be close. Wouldn't even be close. Look, there's some people that are going to vote Republican no matter what. They don't want there to be, they don't want a woman to have a right to choose. They just love billionaires. I don't know, right? I'm not saying we get 100% of the vote, but I think we get like 70%. I think you would see those times around FDR when it was landslides come back. Because right now, the Republicans' policies hurt most of America. So they just lie about it, whether it's Ghislaine Maxwell's transcripts, whether it's the federal takeover, Washington, D.C., whether it's who pays for tariffs, doesn't matter. Current Republicans just lie to their voters. Someone that doesn't lie to his voters is our guest, André Carson. So glad to have him come on. We had a great talk. We even got into music a little bit. I'm going to have to go on my explanation sometime of how 1984, 1988 may have been two of the greatest years in the history. And a lot of that has to do with the Ghostbusters movies, which does come up in our interview. So stay tuned, and thanks for tuning in to On Trial. Welcome back, everyone. We have a very special guest today. It's not every day you have a sitting congressman joining your show. So please welcome Congressman André Carson. Congressman, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here, man. I'm finally on your show, man. Good stuff. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Congressman, you represent Indiana. You're one of our 9 representatives. You're just south of where I live, but I feel like you represent me because even though it's kind of, well, actually, we have a lot to talk about redistricting.
Let's go.
But I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Used to the saying was politics is local, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like things are more and more nationalized. So even though you are a representative for your district and there's 9 for Indiana, do you feel like that puts an outsized influence on you to represent all Hoosiers and not just the Hoosiers in your district?
Yeah, that's an important question. I mean, obviously, I'm here to represent the 7th, but as a proud Hoosier who waves the Hoosier flag regularly, no matter where I am, I get teased about it. I don't have an issue with it. I think what I try to do in that is be respectful of my Democratic colleagues, be they state legislators, city councilors, school board members, local officials, in that process, because I firmly believe that this is a shared enterprise. I'm always suspicious of people running for office, whether sitting or running, who promise to do all things themselves. And voters don't want people lording over them. I'm a representative of taxpayer interests. I'm a representative of Hoosier values. I don't mind being a voice for Hoosiers. I do it very proudly. But I was just in Bloomington recently. Folks asked me to come, and if folks want me to come to Vigo County or Allen County or Marshall County, where I used to work, if the schedule allows, I'll be there. But I always want to be respectful of the local officials because, people are people, and people they feel a kind of way if they feel like you're coming into their space trying to tell them what to do. So I try to do it cooperatively with an understanding, but I know sometimes moments call for certain people to be representative. And if I If I could represent good folks like you in Hamilton County and other places, man, I'll proudly do it. I used to work for the state of Indiana for nearly a decade, and I traveled across the state. I met some good folks, met some good farmers, met some good people who I'm still friends with, who I used to have great venison, or we know it as deer meat. Still some of my best friends, man. And I'm a Hoosier to the core. So I'm here to serve, my brother, until I'm no longer serving, my brother.
Speaking of feeling like you represent all Hoosiers, with the possible redistricting happening, it's actually possible that your district could end up being in all 92 counties if they get this thing as wild
Yeah.
as they want it. Now, this isn't your first time through, though. You were already in the seat when the redistricting from 2021 happened, correct?
Right. So when I first got to Congress, it took like Megan has the numbers. It took like 5 races. I was on the city council, but before that, I ran for school board and I lost. And that was pretty embarrassing, you know. But I learned a lot of lessons from it. And when I got to Congress, there was still an existing district, and then they redo the maps, and I had the entire south side of Indianapolis, which a lot of Dems felt at the time it was kind of an attempt to screw me over, for lack of a better term. But I played football and basketball on the south side. I have childhood friends who many of whom are Trumpers that I used to hang out with. They spent the night at my place, vice versa, and they're good friends of mine. And so I was acquainted with the South Side enough to feel confident that I could represent some of those people, even if they didn't vote for me.
Now, what's interesting about so when I say the Republicans pushing this gerrymander, I think it's been pretty overt. I mean, President Trump has called and asked people, and JD Vance was sent to Indiana to ask Republican General Assemblies to redistrict. But I guess part of the problem here is, other than George W. Bush, Republicans have only won more than 50% of the national election,
Mhm.
Once in 30, 40 years, right? And yet they have found a way to keep maintaining power. What do you think it is that they're so scared of having to actually be accountable to the voters for?
Yeah, I think that many of them know, as they told me privately, they disagree with Trump's agenda. They think it's a bridge too far in many directions. I think that this notion of taking America back to this mythical good old days, this romanticized good old days, even some of the imagery that we're seeing with recruitment for ICE, or particularly DHS, and kind of having these World War II style posters that have shown parallels to Nazi Germany, is very unfortunate. It's very disrespectful to Jewish brothers and sisters in the Jewish community, and those who survived and are descendants of those who survived the Holocaust and did not survive the Holocaust. I think it's disrespectful. And I think it's that kind of meta messaging that speaks to segments of our population who feel disaffected, and they need someone to blame, and they want to otherize people, and they want to blame Black and brown people and white brothers and sisters like yourself who have global and progressive mindsets, and perhaps think that you're not leaning in the right direction, you're leaning in the wrong direction. And I think it's unfortunate, but it has been Machiavellian enough and skillful enough to win over votes. I just don't think that strategy is sustainable. What I will give my Republican colleagues credit for is that they're very succinct in their messaging. They're very clear. Democrats, I have to catch myself. Sometimes we meander. We start talking about subsection 401, and you're an attorney, so you can get wonkier than I can. I'm just an old cop, but I give them also credit for exploring platforms that Democrats were afraid to explore. Even the manosphere. A lot of people have feelings about the manosphere, but I think that is an important segment to reach out to men who feel disaffected and overlooked. And Republicans were brilliant, and they still have a heavy footprint in the manosphere. And I think it's an opportunity for Democrats to do the same thing.
I would agree completely, because I think some of it's not just, in the manosphere, people feeling disaffected or what have you. It's just they're not consuming politics in any other way. And so then JD Vance or Donald Trump goes on this podcast and I mean, they lie through their teeth, right? They say they're going to solve every problem ever, not raise the debt.
Hmm.
It's some pretty magic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds reasonable to someone that doesn't really follow politics and otherwise would know that that's not possible. How do you balance that though? Like anybody that knows you knows you're one of the more blatant truth tellers in Congress, right? Like
Thank you.
you answer the question, you say what you're thinking, and that's one of the reasons why, your constituents love you. But how do you balance that when you're running against a party that's saying they can solve everything, and then if they don't solve a problem, they just kind of lie about the result?
Yeah, it's an ongoing pursuit, brother Josh, man. I have to tell you, because oftentimes and most times in life, the lie will outweigh the truth. And we have a wonderful team, blessed to have a wonderful team of folks who are smarter than I am. And just working with folks, brilliant folks. I try to work with people who are smart like yourself and other people, and really get insights and expand ways in which I'm reaching. One of the things that I love about social media, for all that it's criticized for, rightly so in many cases, is that people don't have to rely on legacy media outlets or traditional platforms to get their messages heard, and that creates a better opportunity if you're running for office, if you're in office, to try to pitch something to a local station and they're already busy trying to report missing children stories or something like that. Social media allows you to kind of tell your story and create your own narrative and have people dial into what you're doing. But, the question now becomes, how do you stay engaged when the world has gotten smaller because of social media, but it has also made us probably more short term in terms of our thinking. So our attention span is probably, if you're that interested, 15 seconds of watching some reel, if you're lucky. If you can capture that mind for 3 to 4 seconds, you're doing even better. And how do you deliver a message that is engaging enough? Because I'm around a lot of, younger millennials and Gen Zers, and, as the greatest generation that we've seen so far, by the way, as an Xer, being in between boomers, millennials, and Zers, creating that balance. I mean, Xers were the ones uh, who gave the world Facebook, Amazon. And so we came off the cusp of this boomer, industrialized generation to the tech world. Even going back to 80s music, it was always kind of what artists thought the future would sound like. So a lot of keyboards. I grew up obviously loving hip hop, but very influenced by a lot of the R&B and rock, and then the Euro rock, and now what is known as electronica music scene, the new wave scene. I'm kind of deviating, and Josh, I know we're gonna delve into some other stuff. We have similar interests. But what I appreciate about this generation,
Mm.
and Republicans have been able to leverage, is that they've been able to tell their lie in very clear formats. They even utilize TikTok. I mean, they're beating us at our own game.
Mm-hmm.
Obama was revolutionary in the movement that he built nearly 2 decades ago. The question becomes, how do we recapture that electricity to meet today's demand?
Yeah. And a note about your Gen X, I have this theory on this. I think you could see a lot of how Gen X thinks about things by the fact that you guys were kind of the generation that was raised by MTV. You know what I mean? Like,
Break that down. Break that down.
so I think, first off, Gen X was the most Trump voting demographic
Okay.
age group this last time, right?
Okay.
And I think that the whole MTV, the Pepsi generation thing, some of that was, the reaction was to check out of, okay, here's the social structure. Here's what we're going to rebel. We're going to be over here. And so I think there's something more about about Gen Xers wanting an outsider, but also kind of having a dismissiveness, right? Because that's kind of that was a lot of what happened with, MTV, right? Like a lot of the, I mean, fight for your right to party. You could go on and on about how a lot of it's rejecting the system.
Sure.
But now these same people are voting for president, and they're taking that same theory into it, and they're just rejecting the system.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, Donald Trump is not at all the MTV person, right? Like he plays a character and then he goes in there and does whatever the hell he wants.
That's a fascinating view, man. That's intriguing. I think you're onto something. Also, Gen Xers, we grew up with Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Even during the New Jack Swing era, which is one of my favorite eras of music, Bobby Brown, who I love. Donald Trump was in his video for the Ghostbusters movie, On Your Own. Donald Trump was on Will Smith. Half of the rappers and artists had a Donald Trump reference in their music because, rap represents an aspirational lifestyle. You talk about driving a Benz or Rolls Royce and you're still living with mom, it's about visualizing and making statements of affirmation that bring you to a point of prosperity. And Donald Trump represented that. So we grew up with Donald Trump. I mean, admittedly, I grew up, I've read all of Donald Trump's books. And I was a big Donald Trump fan, and I came in when he ran with admiration and respect for him. Obviously, I'm very critical of his policies, but coming from the extra generation who grew up with Donald Trump. And I think that was a part of the appeal. And you're right, brother Josh, on the Rebel piece, Beastie Boys, Public Enemy, a lot of the music. I mean, Gen X brought us Nirvana. They brought us NWA, Ice Cube, Beastie Boys. They brought us Chili Peppers. They brought us Nine Inch Nails. A lot of the rebelling that we saw was different from the 60s and early parts of the 70s. You had the Panthers, hip hop, and even rock and alternative rock took it to a different level and really pressing and questioning the system. And I think that disillusionment of the American dream manifests itself through artistry in different ways. And now, to your brilliant point, though, brother, as I'm unpacking it, in the vote and support for Donald Trump. No, man, you're onto something.
Yeah, I think a lot of each generation you can see how they're acting based on whatever the most defining thing. Like I think for a lot of us millennials, we graduate high school or college right into the Great Recession, right? And so our belief of how the economy works is based on this new economy that for 10 years was moving slow, even though, I mean, thank God, President Obama prevented us from having a depression instead of a recession. But it wasn't this, it's always going up that a lot of our parents did go through. So not for nothing, by the way, that Bobby Brown song on Our Own is one of my favorite for two reasons. One, I love the Ghostbusters movies.
Come on.
But two, Bobby Brown and Whitney Houston were like royalty in my household. So it was,
man. I love that. Absolutely. Good.
I couldn't quite get the dance moves down. The lack of rhythm was really killing me.
No, man, you got it. That was a great couple. And Whitney Houston, an American icon, along with Bobby Brown, one of the original founders, maybe the founder of New Edition, man. So what a power couple, man. So to have them honored in your home, man, that says a lot, man. You grew up with some soul, my brother.
So look, the redistricting.
Yes, sir.
To get back to that, if this goes through, right? Like I think a lot of voters are going to feel like their voice isn't being heard. But what can Hoosiers do to still make their voice heard?
No, that's an important question. So in Congress, we've been using legislation, we've been using litigation. We have over 200 cases filed, and we've been using activism. And I think that Hoosiers, if we can look at the town halls as a point of reference to how upset not only Hoosiers, but the American public is at many legislators, be they congressional or state or local, have adopted this kind of Trump agenda. Even people who voted for Trump, they're drawing the line and saying, okay, thinking about privatizing Social Security is a deal breaker. Trying to so-called scale back on Medicare and Medicaid and these so-called entitlement programs, those are deal breakers. You're going to have to pay for this at the polls. And I think the more that elected officials feel the heat from constituents and they're moving the mark, I think that will give politicians hopefully the cover and the freedom to break away from Donald Trump. If there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, if you rub him the wrong way, he's done with you. He's your friend one week, and that may feel good and exciting. But if you go against him, or if he just doesn't like you, then you're done. And I think Republicans are under the threat of him playing in their districts and playing in their primaries to the point that they're willing to concede, even if it breaks their own personal philosophy about many of these programs that will impact not only their constituents, perhaps their relatives, perhaps in some cases their parents. It's a fascinating conundrum, but I think the activism is working. Look at the progress that has been made on Gaza from folks. I mean, the sentiment, I think 80 to 90% of Americans think that what's happening in Gaza is unacceptable. And the fascinating and the beautiful thing with respect to my Palestinian brothers and sisters who I love dearly, many of these protests, if not most of these protests, were led by Jewish brothers and sisters in Indiana and across the country. That says a lot about the power of protest. It says a lot about the power of dissent, so much so that the founding fathers in the Constitution address the right to express grievances, to let people blow off steam and to show dissent and dissatisfaction. I think it works. I think when people show up and they call and they complain and they call the governor's office and they call legislators and they call members of Congress enough and persistently and articulately, and they show their contempt for what's happening, it moves the mark. It moves the mark. Now you have folks like Marjorie Taylor Greene and other folks who you never would thought of with being critical of the administration and its international policies as it relates to the Middle East. They're speaking out. I think the same thing could happen as we're seeing indications from legislators out of Hamilton County and in your area who are saying, I'm not for this redistricting effort. I can't rock with it. I can't go for it. And there are some who are far enough removed and who share disdain for the capital cities. I mean, that's a consistent battle in all states with legislators who have a disdain for the larger cities because they feel like they pull all the taxpayer resources, but they still drive down to the events, which is, confusing for me. So I think, Brother Josh, having platforms like yours, people like you still standing up running for office, people like you who are brilliant and who can help the party kind of frame these issues in a clear way using your brilliant legalese and legal mind, I think it helps us, man. I think it helps us. And I think it's people like you, Brother Josh, who can stop the party from being so esoteric and being very clear and saying, hey, I know we have 20 things we want to talk about. Let's focus on these 3 things, hit these 3 points so we can sell to our constituents and keep it moving. I think it's important. And I think it works. The question on this redistricting piece is, the Republicans did a pretty, if I could speak objectively, did a pretty good job of redrawing these maps for themselves last time. I mean, almost without the critique of gerrymandering. I mean, really, they make the mistake when they try to get too cute. So if they want to make these districts and these seats purple, let's go for it. Let's go for it. Listen, I don't have a 40-year plan of being in Congress. I want to, do right by Hoosiers, make a mark, leave it to the next person, right? But I want to be here long enough. I'd love to get a gavel and be a chairman. I mean, I'm not that old in Congress. I had many of my colleagues say, oh, man, my son or daughter's your age. I'm like, dang, really? It's like, God, dog, what am I doing, right? And so I recognize that, but I also think that, the voters have to decide who they want to represent them. I think it's that simple. You can try to control the process and cut it off. If people want people supporting them, and I appreciate your compliment, who are going to speak up unapologetically on behalf of their issues. They don't want to feel like you can be compromised or that you are compromised or that you're backed by folks and you're just happy to be there and there's a puppeteer pulling your strings. And when push comes to shove, you're not going to show the kind of boldness that is required to represent people, especially Hoosiers. As you know, Brother Josh, Indiana, while a largely Republican state, has a very strong, independent, dare I say, libertarian streak. I love my friends in New York. But Hoosiers don't want anybody from any big city trying to tell them what to do. That's just the Hoosier spirit. We resent that. So to even see this discussion comes up, it surprises me. Hopefully it's not sustainable, and even more so in Texas. I mean, what they're doing, I hope Texas doesn't set a precedence for the other states. Now I'm hearing Wyoming, certainly Ohio and Florida, and even South Carolina. It's a sad state of affairs, Brother Josh. I mean, folks are losing. They're afraid of what's going to happen in the midterms, where Dems could possibly regain the House by double digits. But that's another story. But at some point, I think we're going to have to revisit, because there's kind of this divide in the caucus. As you know, you have our brothers and sisters from Democratic Socialists who do a phenomenal job of bringing issues to the forefront and holding Democrats accountable. They don't get enough credit. You have progressives, you have centrists or moderates, and you still have very conservative Democrats or blue dogs. And, I'd love to get your insight at some point as to how we can have these different philosophies and views. I have my thoughts, still be bit tent, but push a collective agenda. My blue dog friends were giving Democrats a headache under Obama for a while, but they were an important voting bloc.
Mm-hmm.
And they helped us push a lot of legislation through. Now there aren't that many blue dogs. They're a part of the New Dem coalition. But what does that look like? I mean, even where you grew up, you shared with me one time, and there are Dems there, but who still have very conservative views, but are proudly Democratic. How do we balance that with, because, you have a social media constituency and you have real constituents. How do you balance that, man?
Well, I have
I know
plenty
you
of
asked the
thoughts,
questions.
but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I will say, I think the most important thing to me
Mm-hmm.
is, regardless of where you fall in the party, is that we agree on the priority in public, and then we can discuss the policy amongst ourselves. And I think that's the difference. If someone tells me I have a plan to help reduce the cost of healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
you're on my team now, right? Like,
Okay.
we're going to talk. We may have completely different ideas on how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But when we only focus on the public debate about the difference in those policies, we're forgetting that we agree on the same goal. The other side doesn't give a shit about this goal.
That's
right. They don't.
That's right.
They literally don't want everyone to have healthcare. They just kicked a bunch of people off Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's not going to agree about how we're going to get stuff done, but we all want to get the same things done on this side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to have more acceptance and focus on that, instead of just, like, I think the Mondami in New York's a good example, right? Because first off, there's this perfect example, actually. When Donald Trump said he's going to do something, a lot of voters are immediately like, well, he won't actually be able to do that. Congress will stop him. But for some reason, when Mondami says something, everybody's like, oh, nope, we're going full socialist, because he still has to respond to other parts of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And so just because, even if someone is a democratic socialist, there's still going to be one person voting on that. They may move the Overton window, but they don't have complete control over everything.
Sure.
So I think that is one of the things people just skip over and want to kick a conservative Democrat or a Democratic socialist immediately out because they don't have the same policy I do. Neither of you are going to get the exact policy you want. That's not how government works.
Facts. So how do we balance, there were some Democrats who felt like progressives were highlighting, protecting LGBTQIA issues more than talking about the economy. And that was a big schism in the party. It was a notable schism in the party. How do you balance those philosophical views,
So I'll tell you, when I ran for office last year, that was a big thing, right? Because I think sometimes people think, look, the Democrats keep focusing on this. But I don't know anybody that campaigned on trans issues. What happened is the Republicans would attack us on it. And then you're responding. Now, I'll be frank, you could pull me into that. If that's a trap, it could be a trap, because I'm going to stand up for my friends, for my family, for my brothers and sisters, the LGBTQ community, every goddamn time.
My man.
And if someone's not going to vote for me because of it, they weren't good. I wasn't going to get their vote anyway. I'm not going to throw a group under the bus ever.
Amen.
And I do think what it has more to do with is the Republicans are just always controlling the narrative. We're always responding. And so now, the only thing the voters heard was I got attacked on trans rights and I responded on trans rights. There wasn't a Democrat like me that was going on all the Manosphere podcasts saying, hey, I want people to have health care. They don't want you to have health care.
Sure.
I actually believe in First Amendment. They just say it and then do the exact opposite, right? But no one's going to people and saying that. So the conversation was set by Trump and Vance.
Great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
I know you have a lot to do. I've already taken up too much of your time for today, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. So let me just ask if you could tell the viewers, hey, how can they support you next year when you're up for re-election?
No, thank you. AndreCarson.com, AndreCarson.com. You can go to our Instagram website, Andre for Congress. You can call me or call our team, 317-226-9400, 317-9400. You want to volunteer? We're here. If you're interested in politics, we're here to help. If you're thinking about joining the campaign or helping out, we're here. You know, I tell people all the time, identify a campaign that shares your values. You may not agree with everything. That's okay. But I think being a part of an effort allows you to kind of fill out your own personal philosophy. You build lifelong relationships. You build a future army for yourself should you choose to run. I mean, you know, Brother Josh ran, and God bless the people who helped Brother Josh. The question is, will you volunteer for Brother Josh on his next run? And what might that run be? It might be statewide. Stay tuned. And, you know, we need your help. Next year is going to be a very tough election. It's going to be a critical election. While we are engaging with younger millennials and zennials, we know that social scientists and political experts tell us that's not a reliable voting bloc for midterm elections. But we want to get that demographic out regardless. But at the same time, I think the vitriol will increase. I think the xenophobia will increase. I think the homophobia will increase. I think the otherizing will increase. The Islamophobia will increase. We need all Hoosier hands on deck who want to help our efforts or other efforts to show up, get people to the polls so we can put a dent in whatever comes out of this redistricting effort. If anything happens at all, we have to show that Democrats have a presence in this state and we will not be overlooked or forgotten.
That's right. Congressman André Carson, you may not be my representative geographically, but I feel.
I appreciate you, brother.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm in Hamilton County all the time, too, man. I got people up there, so I love Hamilton County, man. Absolutely. And Noblesville is beautiful, man. They're doing great things. Westfield, too.
Yep, really are.
Absolutely.
Congressman André Carson, thank you again for your time.
Thank you,
Best of
Brother
luck to you
Josh.
next year, and
Thank you, man.
On Trial with Josh Lowry.